How to create bonsai from root cuttings. Here's some I planted recently. I planted these two 1 year ago. This one is 2 years old. A bit later I'd like your opinions on what to do with this field elm. I'm Darren. If you're new to my channel, my videos are all about sharing my journey in the world of bonsai. Along the way I'll be sharing some of the approaches and information that I gather as I go. So if that sounds like something you're into, please consider subscribing. I covered the process of taking and planting root cuttings in a previous video, so if you've not seen that, check it out, the link's in the description below. So where the root cutting was severed, there is usually going to be a wound, and oftentimes the wound dies back a bit. And so what we need to do now is clean up that wound and any dieback so that it can heal and grow with the best quality transition from the root to the stem as we can possibly achieve. I'm going to come in with a sharp knife and just dislodge some of this old bark that's starting to pull away. I don't want to damage any of the stems, the buds, or my fingers. And so anytime that I see green or white tissue such as that, I know that I've gone far enough. So I've tried to remove as little tissue as I can. The less living tissue that I take away, the better really. Now I've got 3 pieces of live growth coming from this point. I need to take out this center chunk of dead wood. In order to do that, I'm going to use my cutters, and I have to sacrifice one of these secondary pieces of growth. I'm just going to take off the top one here, and I do my best to maintain the other 2 shaving it away with small bites of the cutters there. Now that I've cut that as cleanly as I possibly can, I'm going to use a small piece of cut paste to seal this wound, but petroleum jelly will also do a sufficient job. In the case of petroleum jelly, smear a thin layer on, covering all open areas of the wound. Or if you've got cut paste to hand, again, working the cut paste onto all of those freshly cut areas. Okay, I'm happy with that. Oh, this one's going to be much easier. That's looking nice. Same again, a little bit of wound sealer. Job's a good one. In the next few days I'm going to need to repot this field elm, Ulmus minor. Let me know in the comments which pot you think would work best. We've got pot 1, pot 2, and pot 3. The other thought that I had was, instead of keeping it upright, to turn it flat on its side and create quite an interesting raft composition. I can't turn it all the way because the soil's going to fall out, but hopefully you can sort of get a feel for what it might look like. So I'd love to know your thoughts. If you could write me a comment down below, pot 1, 2 or 3, raft or upright, that would be hugely appreciated. Now, to get some good growth like we saw on the other big one, I'm going to put them into bigger containers. I don't want these to grow rampant. They've got a bit of character to the bark, and I'm worried that if they grow bananas like that 2-year-old one, they'll lose some of that character, and I think we can make some smaller trees out of these ones. Using the ancient technique of tickling the roots to get the soil out, handed down from generation to generation. In the root system of this one, we've got a bit of a choice to make. We've got several roots coming from this point here, and then we've got this big thicker root that's coming from the trunk about 1/3 of the way up. Now we could choose to make a feature out of that, or we can cut it off and create a more traditional nabari at this level. Because we've got numerous roots coming from this point, I'm going to go for the more traditional approach. So I'm going to come in with my cutter that's reserved for roots, cut that one off nice and flush. If we wanted to, we could plant this and we'd have another root cutting. I've also cut that strong central root out because we've got quite a lot of nice roots forming a good nabari. So I've removed that one as well. Because these are only 1 year old cuttings, I better not be too harsh with the root pruning. All that's left to do now is to pot it up. So I've got a little bit of soil at the bottom, and now I'm going to try and position this root cutting in a way that the roots are kind of quite nicely distributed, as good as I can get it. I'm going to hover with the cutting at this level, and I'm going to slowly fill until we're at the nabari level, and what will be the future nabari is nice and buried. I'm not going to bury it too deeply because being an elm, we run the risk of it producing more roots further up the trunk and then we'll get inverse taper. But I do need to bury it enough such that the tree is supported. With the chopstick, I'm just going to make sure that the soil is worked in between the roots and supporting those roots. Because this is used soil and it hasn't dried out yet, it doesn't pour quite as well. Normally I wouldn't reuse soil, but I've got lots of it lying around at the moment, and being just a root cutting, it's fine. That's ready to be watered in, and if it still seems a bit wobbly, I'll use a bit of bamboo and tie it to a bit of bamboo as a stake just until it firms up in its pot. Because this one's pretty big, I don't actually want it to get any bigger. I'm going to drastic prune this one and then I'll come in and try and sort out the roots. I'm just going to roughly chop it at a convenient location for the time being. Here we go. That was drastic. So this one's been untouched for 2 years, hence all that growth. So I can be a lot more drastic with the roots of this one, and I'm probably going to need to be. But it's firmly wedged in there. I have to scrape around the edges. Let's give it a try. There we go. Oh, we go. Looks like we've got plenty more root cuttings to be had here. Right, let's see what we've got in terms of nabari then, shall we? Go nice and steady. And that's around the surface roots. Now it's a case of trying to make sense of this. So we've got a root that's coming from down here and it's going all the way back up here. So if I cut that one out of the way, that's better. This root here is coming from the side and pointing up, so let's get rid of that one. Thicker pieces down here. Cut those out. Some very thick chunks here. I'll have to deal with those soon. Let's just make a bit more sense of what we've got. That's torn when I cut it out, so let's cut that. This starts, we've got a root here then, starts somewhere around here, going all the way around the outside. Definitely a circling root, this one. I'm not going to try and yank it out. I'm going to strategically try and cut it away. Where I can see what I'm cutting. Now I know that this tree was very healthy because of all the fertilizer it received and growing that it did. I can quite comfortably come in, remove that large root and that large root. Try and get a bulk of this soil out now. And then we'll wash the roots off and have a good look. Right, I'm gonna get cleaned up, get this washed, and then we'll come in and have a closer look. Here we are, nice and clean. So let's see about making some sense of this lot. So here we've got this big thick root, comes down and then back on itself. Well, we don't want roots coming back on themselves. So let's see about cutting it out a bit. Make a bit of space first. Under here we've got like a little root going straight down. Don't want that one. I've also got another one going straight down. That one can also go. This is what I love about root cuttings. You can get some absolutely crazy shapes that you would never think to create otherwise. Never in a million years would I have imagined to create something like this. Now the question is, do we look to maximise the crazy or do we turn it into a bonsai? I'm going to leave the crazy roots as they are. I'm going to get it planted in with some fresh soil and we'll let this one grow. Just going to make sure that we filled any gaps among those roots. Nice helping of moss. Keep those roots nice and healthy where they've been partially exposed. Right, I'll get this watered in and then I'll tell you about the plan moving forward. So after that pretty major operation, I'm obviously going to need to give it some time to recover. And I'm probably going to give it a full season of recovery time. I'll water it, fertilise quite heavily once it shows signs of growth. If you'd like to see more about how I'll develop this weird ant-like tree, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'll be sure to do updates.